Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James Bond.
Bond. James Bond.
Bond.
James Bond.
Ian Fleming's ultimate secret agent, James Bond, has been featured consistently in films ever since Dr. No debuted in 1962. And many facets of this character have remained unchanged over the years. He's always been fast with a quip,
Shocking.
armed with a gadget collection that would make sharper image blush, and he's been remarkably consistent with his cocktail order.
Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
Vodka martini.
Shaken, not stirred.
But as with any film franchise stretching across multiple decades, the Bond films have changed with the times. Here's how the James Bond franchise has evolved over the years, starting with the Sean Connery era, and not including 1967's Casino Royale, because it's not Neon production, and come on, it stinks. Let's begin at the beginning. Sean Connery was the first actor to play James Bond on screen, and was a relative unknown in '62 when he made his Dr. No debut, except for all you Darby O'Gill and the Little People stands. You're out there, represent.
Are you sure?
I am.
As such, Connery defined the character as we know him today. His Bond is suave, sexy, and fearless. He's the perfect gentleman and the masculine ideal, and he's entirely dedicated to Queen and country, never doubting the importance of his mission and his sacred duty to see it through to the end. In some ways, the performance from all future Bond actors act as responses to the Connery original, tweaking or even upending some element of his classic formula to help redefine the character for a new generation of fans. These early missions and the villains behind them also helped fine-tune and hone the formula and structure that continue to guide Bond adventures to this day. 007 investigates curious goings-on in exotic, far-flung locations. He discovers that the criminal enterprise is the work of an inscrutable, wealthy villain with a lair, henchmen, and an over-the-top plan.
Do you expect me to talk?
No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Then Bond, with aid from a local woman or member of a villain's inner circle, infiltrates and ultimately destroys the entire operation, typically in the moments before it all blows up. The very first Bond film, Dr. No, adheres closely to this formula from the very start. It's the first time 007 introduces himself on camera.
Bond. James Bond.
It co-stars Ursula Andress as the prototypical Bond girl, Honey Ryder, setting the standard for all the franchise's many sexual innuendo stuffed names to follow.
She's known as Octopussy.
Plus, Dr. No introduces the evil organization Spectre, though only as a throwaway reference.
Spectre.
Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, Extortion.
Spectre gets a bit more screen time in the follow-up film, From Russia with Love, which also includes an offhand reference to the organization's leader and Bond's future arch-nemesis, Ernst Stavro Blofeld. At first, he's only referred to as Number 1.
Number 3, is your section ready to carry out Kronstein's directives?
Yes, number 1.
Even more Spectre details start to get filled in by 1965's Thunderball, including the memorable briefing scene that was directly parodied in Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. Back in the classic Connery days, the gadgets Bond would take along on these missions were traditional 60s spycraft, largely playing around the idea of using tiny, hidden, or covert surveillance tools and weapons that an enemy can't see or wouldn't be expecting. This was an analog era, so the Connery Bond's most memorable gadgets were purely mechanical in nature, like the cigarette gun from You Only Live Twice. 1964's Goldfinger, the third film in the Eon series, marked the first appearance of Bond's Aston Martin DB5. This vehicle, tricked out by Q with a number of surprises, including a smokescreen, bullet shield, ejector seat, is just one of the many that the character's driven over the course of the series, but easily the most memorable. The format established in these early films continues throughout the franchise. Q shows Bond how his equipment works in the first act, then Bond road tests it against some bad guys in Act 2 or 3. I believe they call that Chekhov's exploding briefcase. No surprise that the first entry starring Connery also established how James Bond interacted with the women he'd meet on his adventures. Typically, the early Bond girls fit into a few categories. Either allies who, like him, have a vested interest in bringing down the villain, turncoats who switch to Bond's side from the villains, or victims who help Bond and then suffer a terrible fate. Two Goldfinger characters in particular have become the prototypical examples of these archetypes. Flying ace Pussy Galore, who works as a pilot for bad guy Auric Goldfinger, but eventually aligns herself with Bond, and Goldfinger's girlfriend and accomplice Jill Masterson, who tips Bond off to his card-cheating scheme and pays for it by being dipped in gold paint and dying from skin asphyxiation. Most of the Bond girls in Connery films, such as Lana Wood as Plenty O'Toole in Diamonds Are Forever, only appear very briefly and are played more as eye candy than fleshed out characters. But in a departure from how Connery's Bond treats women, in George Lazenby's On Her Majesty's Secret Service, we meet the only woman who's ever convinced James to settle down, Teresa Draco, played by Diana Rigg, who would later star as Lady Olenna Tyrell in Game of Thrones. Bond's marriage to Tracy and her death at the hands of Blofeld's subordinate Irma Bunt would become one of the few true points of continuity throughout the entire Bond series until Daniel Craig at least. The next movie in the series, Diamonds Are Forever, finds Bond tracking Blofeld, presumably for revenge, while Teresa's death is mentioned in The Spy Who Loved Me, For Your Eyes Only, License to Kill, GoldenEye, and The World Is Not Enough. Roger Moore joined the series in 1973 for Live and Let Die, and went on to play Bond 6 more times, remaining in the role for a total of 12 years. That's the record for the longest stint as Bond in history. He's also the oldest actor to ever play 007, departing the series after A View to a Kill at age 58. Moore introduced a more freewheeling and humorous Bond, with more of a tongue-in-cheek joie de vivre than the Connery era. In some of the films, Bond even hints at a level of self-awareness, making the films at times nearly a parody of the suave, manly, tough guy sexiness that dominated the Connery years. This trickled down even to the series' cartoonish supporting characters, particularly bumbling Southern lawman J.W. Peppa, who appeared in both Live and Let Die and its follow-up, The Man with the Golden Gun. The 70s Bond films also reflected some of the popular themes and genres of the time. Live and Let Die incorporated elements from blaxploitation films, even casting Black Caesar and Hell Up in Harlem star Gloria Hendry as the first African-American Bond girl, Rosie Carver. Moonraker, Bond's first adventure in space, came out just 2 years after George Lucas's Star Wars changed the face of blockbuster tentpole filmmaking forever. Moore's era also brought a certain vulnerability to Bond, who's functionally an unkillable superhero in many of his other incarnations. Octopussy famously features the suave secret agent in a clown outfit, and being goofed on by local teens while hitchhiking, while Bond gets klutzy on skis in For Your Eyes Only, while he gets whirled around against his will, Spies Like Us style in Moonraker. The scale and size of the missions on which Moore's Bond embarks also grew with the times, as the 1970s and 80s introduced new kinds of groundbreaking special effects technology, and blockbuster films generally upped the ante on the kinds of spectacle action fans expected. The Bond films did their best to keep pace. 1974's Man with the Golden Gun gives M an impressively scaled capsized freighter, the RMS Queen Elizabeth, as a base of operations, and provides the villainous Scaramanga with his own car plane, while Bond drives a combo sports car and submarine in Spy Who Loved Me. The stunt work also got more impressively elaborate. The famous 3,000-foot ski jump from the opening to Spy Who Loved Me was performed by American stuntman and climber Rick Sylvester, and took 3 full weeks of rehearsals and preparation. Sylvester also did the stunt work on For Your Eyes Only. As movies grew more intense and even violent over the years, the Moore Bond series also made the changeover. While he's always had a license to kill, Moore's Bond is at times remarkably efficient at doing away with his enemies, as in this famous moment from The Spy Who Loved Me, where he knocks a henchman named Sandor off a building simply by readjusting his tie. In terms of the gadgets, the Moore films were also upgraded to keep pace with the times. While Connery's Bond favored tiny or hidden mechanical devices, Moore's 007 got some more high-tech applications, like the safe-cracking cigarette in Moonraker, which presaged a lot of modern hacking sequences. On the Bond girl front, things started to change, as actress Maud Adams played 2 Bond girls, both depicted as capable operators in their own right. In The Man with the Golden Gun, she's Andrea Anders, a mistress of Christopher Lee's villain Scaramanga, who betrays him and is then killed as a consequence. Then in Octopussy, she's introduced as a powerful female villain, the series' first, though this is ultimately undermined at the end, when she's knocked out and kidnapped by the real villain, Louis Jordan as Kamal Khan. Still, there were a few exceptions throughout the Moore era that hinted at where the female roles would go in the future. Lois Chile's Holly Goodhead in Moonraker is both a brilliant doctor and a CIA agent who proves herself a capable fighter. Her help is vital in stopping the evil Drax's master plan, and she actually gets to survive until the end of the movie. She's got it all! The 4th overall actor to play James Bond, Timothy Dalton, was originally offered the role in 1969, but he turned down the chance to take over for Sean Connery after You Only Live Twice, fearing that he was a bit too young for 007. Dalton's name came up again after Moore announced a planned retirement from the Bond franchise in 1981, but when he changed his mind and went forward with For Your Eyes Only, Dalton's Bond career was delayed again. He finally made his debut in the role in 1987 with The Living Daylights. Interesting side note, future Bond Pierce Brosnan also did a screen test for this movie. Dalton's take on the character is a bit more serious than Moore's, turning down the camp and giving him a more aloof and less jokey demeanor. In fact, Dalton's very first scene, the intro to Living Daylights, doesn't contain a single quip. Damn, that's a hard-ass Bond. In License to Kill, Dalton's Bond literally turns rogue and has his 007 status revoked.
Your License to Kill is revoked.
A first for the entire series. As with his counterpart in the Daniel Craig years, Dalton's Bond also maintains more personal relationships and connects emotionally with his work. License to Kill opens with Bond attending the wedding of his friend, now DEA agent Felix Leiter, in a rare glimpse at his off-duty lifestyle. In keeping with contemporary late 1980s action franchises, the Dalton Bond films turn the violent mayhem up to 11. Check out the grisly death waiting for Benicio del Toro's brutal cartel henchman Dario in License to Kill.
Are you alright?
Switch the bloody machine off!
See? Not even a quip after a guy falls into a shredding machine. This Bond is all business. The missions reflected the era as well, with The Living Daylights focused on an American arms dealer villain and depicting an ongoing Soviet war in Afghanistan, and License to Kill going straight Miami Vice with a storyline centered around Bond's pursuit of a Florida drug lord. The Dalton films are also where you see Bond's female companions begin to truly enter the modern era. Carrie Lowell as Pam Bouvier in License to Kill serves as a wholesale refutation of the classic Bond girl archetype. She calls out Bond's womanizing, challenges Q's suggestion that seducing women is all part of the job, saves Bond from the brutal Dario, and even mocks Talisa Soto's more conventional Bond girl character, Lupe Lamora.
I love James so much.
When Timothy Dalton first landed the role of James Bond, filming was delayed so he could complete work on a big screen adaptation of Brenda Starr. You all remember Brenda Starr? No? Not at all? That's not really a movie? Sure it is, check it out. Anyway, Pierce Brosnan was first considered to take up the mantle back at that time, but he had to back out due to his pre-existing commitment to TV's Remington Steele. The pieces didn't all come together for Brosnan to join the series until GoldenEye, which was originally conceived for Timothy Dalton, but delayed by legal disputes until 1995, long after he retired from the series and moved on to Harassing the Rocketeer. Brosnan's approach to Bond functions as a kind of synthesis of all that has come before. Like Connery, he's unflappable and confident without being brash or smarmy. Like Moore, he's quick with a quip and never too self-serious about being a larger-than-life kind of figure. But like Dalton, he's also a man of action and the centerpiece for some of the series' most grandiose action sequences. Though Dalton's films had focused on contemporary bad guys like drug kingpins, the Brosnan Bond films were the first ones to take place in a truly post-Cold War reality, and the missions reflected a world in which you couldn't just fall back on the Soviets when you needed all-purpose bad guys. The films came up with a variety of solutions. GoldenEye pits Bond against a former colleague, Sean Bean, as former 006 Alex Trevelyan, while Tomorrow Never Dies co-stars Jonathan Pryce as a villainous media magnate, widely read at the time as a send-up of Ted Turner, Bill Gates, or Rupert Murdoch, depending on who you asked. Plus, there's the extremely outside-the-box appearance-shifting North Korean Colonel Tan Sun Moon, who transforms himself into the European Gustav Graves via DNA replacement therapy, which, last I checked, is not a real thing. Probably the most significant update to the entire franchise in the Brosnan era was another personnel shift, the introduction in GoldenEye of Judi Dench as the new M. Dench was the first woman to take on the role, and played the first M who was kind of antagonistic towards Bond.
I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. A relic of the Cold War.
The World Is Not Enough also foreshadows the closer relationship the two characters would develop in the Craig films. In general, lady characters get a lot more to do in the Brosnan films than at any other time in the franchise's history. Famke Janssen's GoldenEye henchwoman Xenia Onatopp proves herself as much more than Bond's equal in the battlefield and the bedroom. In Tomorrow Never Dies, Michelle Yeoh plays Wai Lin, an extremely capable and fiendishly clever Chinese police officer who's an equal partner to Bond in just about every way, and being Michelle Yeoh, she also dominates most of the duo's big action set pieces. Most of the Brosnan Bond girls get to have real-world credentials. Elektra King is a devious and conniving criminal mastermind, Jinx is an elite professional assassin, and Dr. Christmas Jones is a nuclear scientist named Dr. Christmas Jones. Which brings us to Daniel Craig and the current era of James Bond. This, of course, is the very first group of films within the franchise to remain entirely interconnected, with actual linear continuity. We follow James from earning his 00 status at the opening of Casino Royale, through his various assignments, which have all been tied together through the pursuit of the evil organization Quantum and ultimately Spectre, leading to the reveal of Christoph Waltz as Blofeld. The personality of Craig's Bond also breaks the mold in a variety of ways. He's frequently referred to as a thug, and struggles a bit with the suave, seductive part of the job that came so naturally to Connery's incarnation. He's moody and downbeat, and even his jokes tend more towards sardonic or world-weary observations than zingy one-liners.
I'm afraid I'm not that cruel.
Well, perhaps you just had to practice.
The action, accordingly, is focused more on physical exertion and brutality. The famed parkour chase from Casino Royale is among the most relentless and intense from the entire series, and showed off a new physicality for Bond. It's notable, too, that Craig's Bond is often visibly exhausted by his efforts, not to mention sometimes seriously wounded at their conclusion. Though Brosnan was the first Bond to endure actual on-screen torture during The World Is Not Enough, Casino Royale's brutality ups the ante in an extended sequence that's almost unbearable to watch should you happen to possess a pair of testicles. Bond's missions in the Craig films are also more ground-level and realistic. We still get wealthy European villains with grandiose plans, but they're making less visible, ostentatious aesthetic choices, opting for hidden or covert layers instead of floating palaces at sea or volcano bases. As well, their plans are less maniacally over-the-top and more intricately plotted and careful, particularly Silva's devious attempt to take out M in Skyfall, which owes more than a little debt to the Joker's fiendish game plan in The Dark Knight. With its focus on gritty realism, Craig's series naturally also downplays the use of zany gadgets.
A gun and a radio. Not exactly Christmas, is it?
Were you expecting an exploding pen?
Though there are a few fun moments to highlight. In Casino Royale, Bond's car comes outfitted with a defibrillator, which is handy. I mean, it's not zany, but it's handy. As for Bond girls, this time around, they not only get their own backstories, but their own narratives and personal missions. These are characters whose journeys intersect with Bond, but are not defined by his presence, or even dependent on him to reach their conclusion. Government accountant Vesper Lynd in Casino Royale has her own agenda that we only come to understand by the end of Quantum of Solace, long after her death. The Craig films also significantly deepen and enhance his relationships with a number of the franchise's best-known supporting characters. This is particularly true of Judi Dench's M, who has a lot of her backstory filled in and takes on an almost maternal role for Bond by the conclusion of her final appearance in Skyfall. Having continuity also means more opportunities to work in supporting players like Jeffrey Wright's Felix Leiter, and also worth noting for the record, CNN's Wolf Blitzer appears as himself in both Skyfall and Mission Impossible Fallout, indicating that both franchises could in fact be taking place in a shared alternate reality, the Blitzerverse. And there you have it. Not a small amount of evolving for a character that conventional wisdom would hold never actually evolves very much at all. So enjoy watching James Bond turn yet another corner in No Time to Die, and keep it here on Phantom Entertainment for more about all your favorite franchises and how they're keeping up with the relentless march of history. Or just who's gonna star in the next sequel. Whichever, really. It's all good.